What's up, everybody? Welcome to Overcoming Average. Today I have Yanni with me. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it sure has.
Thanks for showing up. It was a last minute thing. I just texted you and you were able to pop over. So yeah, I was just telling the story of these coffee mugs. Like I said, my dad used to have them, and my dad is, he's still around. I'm thankful to have my parents and everything. But it's good. It's good memories. As a kid, I grew up watching my dad drink coffee, and at the time when I was drinking out of these coffee mugs, I just hated it. But I always thought it was cool to drink coffee.
Oh yeah. I mean, these are special. I mean, you look at the shape. You got the globe. It's kind of like globe shaped.
Yep.
Like glass
Yeah.
mug.
So cheers. Well, thanks for coming on.
Great coffee.
Yeah, man. So I want to kind of hear your story. I've always thought you're an interesting guy. We met in the band at church. I was playing guitar and you were playing all the auxiliary drums.
The engine room percussion. Yeah.
The engine room. So, yeah, man, let's start at the beginning. Let's just, I know you're from Lebanon, which just timestamp. We literally just found a little while ago about that crazy explosion. So I'm hoping that all your family and stuff's okay over there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's absolutely devastating, but
Yeah.
thank you.
And I'm sure we'll see more of what that actually was, and hopefully everything will be okay. But yeah, start. Where'd you come from, and how'd you get here?
Sure. So actually my family is from Lebanon, and back in the early 70s, they really escaped in about 1974. Another war erupted in Lebanon, and their house got hit with shrapnel, blew a hole through the living room, and my brother was 3 at the time.
Really?
So they basically got a escape car, if you will, a taxi to Syria, took a Pan Am flight here with nothing but a rubber diaper bag.
Really?
Yeah, and ended up in Worcester, Massachusetts, where my father's sister had previously started to come over, and then shortly after bring her kids. We ended up there. We had a family that owned family members that owned a Middle Eastern restaurant called the El Morocco, which was famous in its time. And my family just started working there. My dad worked multiple jobs like he did in Lebanon. And I was born here in 78 and in Worcester, Massachusetts, which was a very interesting town right outside of Boston.
Yeah.
It's one town at that time, 10 colleges in a small city.
Really?
So it was a very amazing and unique way to grow up around college students, and very cultural, multicultural. So there's anywhere from Lebanese to Albanian to Spanish to African American. It's a big mix.
So, why Massachusetts?
Yeah, I think mostly for the family. I think that we had my dad's sister that came over, so they knew of a place. They knew of, and then also the Abudi family were first cousins of ours that had this restaurant, and some of the cousins I had, my godfather had married one of the Abudis too, and we knew a lot of the family, so it was the place to come as a Lebanese refugee.
Interesting. Yeah, I've got a buddy who's on the police force here, and he's from Andola, Africa, and yeah, he was a big Patriots fan and stuff, obviously too. But I've always wondered for people who migrate from another country, like why North Carolina, why Boston, why California? I mean, some of them I know, but yeah, Boston in particular, I've noticed. Boston, obviously New York sounded kind of an obvious melting pot of cultures, but yeah, family makes a lot of sense to have somebody who at least knows the territory. So
exactly, yeah, I can only imagine just kind of heading to a place where you just don't know. You're leaving a totally different world, totally different language. My father never really spoke English fluently, really much at all. My mother was a French teacher in Lebanon, so she knew English I'd say fairly well, to just enough to get by. But there was a big community, a lot of support, and then she picked that up pretty quickly. But yeah, you think about Worcester, Massachusetts, just this little blue collar industrial town, and then fast forward, growing up in the restaurant industry is really where my mother worked, my father worked. among other jobs. Then myself, I got a work permit at 14.
Yeah.
Started just chopping lettuce. Learned some really valuable things early on. Some funny stories at the restaurant. So many. One in particular where, you learn things different ways. One of the owners of the restaurant came. I was cutting lettuce, and he said, "Andre, how you doing?" I'm like, "Great." He's like, "You cutting a lot of lettuce. We got a lot of reservations." I said, "Yeah, I got 4 or 5 bins." He goes, "Andre, picture this. You're on a date with your girlfriend." I'm like, "Okay." You sit down in a really nice restaurant and you have a salad. I'm like, "Okay." We order a salad. And then your girlfriend, you try to eat the salad, and you go to eat the salad. He goes, "Try to fit this thing in your mouth. Try to fit this in your mouth." And he was trying to tell me, which I'd never forget, that I cut the lettuce too big. It's a very odd way, but I never cut the lettuce that big anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's pause for a second and
Sure.
talk about that, because was the cuisine Lebanese?
Yeah, it was Lebanese. It's
Interesting.
really Middle Eastern, but really Lebanese, which is kind of the French.
Interesting. Yeah.
influence.
So was that style of food popular back then, or was it a unique food experience for?
Yeah, it was very popular. It's a very healthy earth cuisine, so
Yeah.
everything's very light. Lemon, garlic, oil is like the base of almost everything.
Which, by the way, after I had lunch at your house the other day, I came home that week and I made fattoush.
Fattoush, yes. Yes.
It's fantastic. It's
so
very,
phenomenal.
very good. So
That's a great salad. It's hearty.
yeah.
And everything has a story behind it. Every type of food, like fattoush, is a salad that has pieces of toasted pita bread in it. And it's made because you cut a bunch of vegetables from the garden, whatever they may be, and you have these pita bread, and you use your hands to squish the vegetables between the pita bread and eat it with your hands.
Yeah. It's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started in the restaurant industry, which I think for anybody who grew up sort of with a silver spoon in their mouth, and never had to do restaurant work or scrubbing floors or unloading trucks or that manual labor, there's something about it that just makes you grow up.
Really does. You think about the times that we grew up, being young in the restaurant industry and working with folks that have been in there for a while. You see some of those stories that on Hell's Kitchen, stuff like that. Those are real. I mean, I fought off chefs with fire extinguishers. I have pots and pans thrown at me. It's pretty intense, but it was definitely a learning experience. It matures you real fast.
Yeah. When I was growing up, it was a lot of just work hard. Speaking of my dad was a mechanic in the family garage and learned the family trade. And then he leveled up and went to work for Mecklenburg County. And then he became a manager. So, he was the classic, work your way up the ladder sort of thing, but also just hard work and work with your hands and dig in. And there's something about that. I don't know, something about just sweating over work that does something to you. It maybe in a couple of ways. I remember a couple of jobs I had. I thought, man, I'm never doing manual labor again. I'm going to use my brain.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of a switch for me. I was in the restaurant industry, and then I went to UMass Amherst and studied hotel restaurant management through the Eisenberg Business School, and ended up getting a really good job out of college working for Marriott. I ran the Marriott in Springfield event and wedding management and stuff. There was any events at the hotel and citywide events. And one of my friends that were my roommates in college, he gave me a call and he said, "We're doing this big New Year's Eve party. We want you guys to come." And I said, "I can't. I'm doing this thing." He's like, "You're always working when we're having fun. Every holiday you're working, everything."
Ouch.
Yeah. It's like, I said, "Yeah, that's the industry." He said, "Why don't you come into IT?" He said, "You can learn how to use computers. I can help you." He said, "You know what? You should go get your MCSE." I was like, "My MCS, what?" He goes, "Look it up." Not Google at the time. So, looked up that and ended up going to WPI to try to get my MCSE. While I was there, I found out that I could actually, if I worked at WPI, I can go to school for free. So I actually applied and got a job at WPI at the help desk, actually doing backups at night.
Now, what's WPI?
Worcester Polytechnical Institute.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a college. Gotcha. Yeah. So WPI, they claim the invention of the Segway there from Dean Kamen,
Okay.
who's I think he dropped out, but he went there for a while and invented that. But WPI is an amazing school. Actually, one of the two only colleges in the world that has a mini nuclear reactor on campus.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you where the switch came in because very much like myself, I went from that kind of manual labor and I went to school. And then actually when I got out of engineering school, it was the same for me. I was still doing manual labor. And then I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And I got out and just totally changed careers.
It's amazing.
And ultimately got to IT. So, but let's go back to you. So you go to WPI.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you study there specifically?
So I started my MCSE, which was a course. It was a Microsoft accreditation course. And it was probably about $5,000 at the time. So I had $2,500. My parents loaned me $2,500. And then I figured that I could go to school for free if I went there. So I worked there. So I ended up working there doing tape backup, Amanda VMS, and all these backups at night. And they said, Andre, you have management experience. Do you want to help build out the help desk and manage the help desk? I said, absolutely. So I can work days? And they said, yeah. So I ended up working days. And, this is the kind of the crux of the story is that I'm working the help desk and this guy calls and he says, hey, is there any students there that want to make some extra money? And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, I have a virus on my computer and my wife needs to learn how to use a digital camera. So anyone to make, and I said, that will be me. And he said, okay. He's like, here's my address. It was in Berlin, Massachusetts. And I drove up to his driveway and then up past the garage, past the horses, past the barn, up to his house. And I was like, whoa. And I started working on his computer and he said, okay. He's like, you're working through. He's like asking me questions about myself and family and where I'm from and stuff like that. And he goes, and I said, well, Mark, what do you do? And he's like, I'm in sales. I said, okay. He's like, what do you sell? He's like, it doesn't really matter. I'm like, well, it does. You have a beautiful place here. And he says, well, thank you. He goes, Andre, do you work in a cube? I said, I do. Then he said, okay. Do you have people that work around you in cubes? I said, yeah. He goes, do you all get paid the same? I said, yes, we do. He's like, do you work harder? I'm like, oh, of course I do. I'm here. He goes, well, forget that. He's like, if in sales, you get compensated for your efforts. The harder and smarter you work, the more you can accomplish and the more you can earn. I was like, wow, that's great. So,
very true.
Very, very true. Yeah. So, he introduced me to a friend that he was doing the Pan Mass Challenge with a company called EMC out of Boston.
The EMC.
The EMC, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Out of Hopkinton, Mass. And I ended up going to the sales school, went through the training program. And like my dad, hardworking, like your dad, basically said, Andre, just keep your head down and keep working. Someone will tap you on the shoulder. And every 18 months, I got a promotion. That's awesome. That was great. Yeah.
Well, I think the time that I've known you, you've got great people skills as well. And that's super important too, because I don't want to say it's a lie that if you work hard, you'll get somewhere, because there's definitely something to it. But it's a combination of hard work, but also you have to work at things like, especially in IT, personality. It's in our industry, in the IT industry, it's super unfortunate because a lot of these people that have that brain, they just are sort of isolated. They like to just learn behind the scenes.
Right.
But yeah, working on yourself, I think as an individual, maybe it comes from that restaurant industry, or maybe it comes from some of that hard work where you have to interface with managers and deal with people. I think it's absolutely essential in IT moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how, was there anything in your life that kind of opened your eyes to that? Like in sales, it's not necessarily, or at least a decade ago, it wasn't necessarily a direct transition from IT into sales. It's like you have to know tech and you have to know people. Mm-hmm. Like I'm saying, I think we would refer to as like a sales engineer,
right?
Which is a great position now because you can talk the talk and you can understand.
Right.
And I personally have seen an industry where people don't want to really hear from the sales guy because they don't know the technical.
That's a great point.
So how did you hone both of those skills at the same time?
Sure. I think there's a kind of a trifecta there. To answer the earlier part of the question, A lot depends with, or to the culture that I grew up in. So the Lebanese culture is all about hospitality. It's actually biblical, talking about, treat your neighbor as you want to be treated, or actually better than you want to be treated. And the Lebanese culture is all about hospitality. It's how do I treat someone? How do I make someone feel better than they would feel if they come into my home than they would at their own home? How do I make them feel comfortable? And a lot of it revolves around food in the industry and being able to accommodate them with good food and with hospitality, send them with food home. It's a big thing in the culture, and it also traverses into sales as well. If you outserve your competition, if you provide your clients with more than they would think that they would need, or just go above and beyond from a hospital, you make them feel comfortable with you. It's a trust. One of the biggest things that people think about sales is they, in the image, they think about this used car sales guy and if you buy today.
Right.
But truly, in the essence, what sales is a transfer of emotions. And being able to transfer the excitement of the particular product or solution that you have that you can help somebody with, whether it's an IT or anything, that's really sales. And that can transfer across all industries.
Yeah.
And from IT, I think you nailed it when you said the sales engineer. So in any industry, but really particularly in tech, you lose a lot of credibility from a sales perspective if you don't really understand the technology, if you can't relate,
Right.
if you can't put yourself in their shoes. Just a point there. I know some people that would try to sell backup products.
Yeah.
And they would say, hey, my backup product can eliminate your backup window. And people are like, eliminate my backup window. And they think it sounds good. It's like, hey, I can take care of this. But a backup window is just the time when people don't use a computer till the time that they start using a computer. So you don't really eliminate the window. You just eliminate the time that they need to do it during that time. Now they can back up during the day without taking processes or
Right.
So you really lose credibility if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't understand the technology.
Absolutely. Well, and I remember specifically, this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. Google Drive was out, Dropbox was out, but it was just getting going. People were sort of, I'm not sure if I want to go to the cloud. The cloud.
Yeah.
And there was a competitor, and I remember speaking with him because he was like a sales partner, and it's like, what do you guys have? And they had this crummy product. And it was like 4 or 5 times the cost of Google Drive. And I remember I just said, can you explain why I should go with this instead of Google? And he just admitted, he just said, we can't compete with them.
Wow.
And I was like, man. So I think the thing that needs to be added to that is when you're doing sales, especially technology sales or anything for that matter, if you have a crummy product, it stinks to be a salesperson. If your product is great, you're just taking orders and, like you said, building relationships.
Yeah, Dick Egan back in the day said it's the product, stupid, was one of his lines. But it really takes, once you have a competitive market,
Yeah.
Then you really have to know your competition. You have to know the differences, and you have to know. So at some points, when you have superior technology, sometimes the product just sells itself.
Yeah, I mean, as an Apple guy, Apple doesn't have to give huge discounts because they're Apple, and you can sell a Dell computer at 50 points, but with Apple, you'll be lucky to get 5 or 15.
Right.
After 250,000 sales. So yeah. So let's go back to your story. So you started in sales. What did that look like? Like you start. What's your first couple of days, couple of weeks look like in that new sales job?
Yeah, so EMC had one of the most rigorous sales training programs. It started way back, not like the Beastie Boys, but way back in history when Xerox started out with a really intense sales program, and that kind of developed over time. And some of those folks influenced the EMC sales training, but it was really breaking the ice. You smiled and dialed, as you say, for 80 dials a day. All day, you're just making phone calls, rejection, and objection handling. And in between, you would be trained on technology. So they would train you on your technology. You would walk by a corridor and you'd see some executive and they would stop and ask you, you're in the sales training program? Yeah. So what does SRDF stand for? And you're like, whoa.
Really?
And yes. And you'd have to talk about load balancing and failover and asynchronous and synchronous replication. I mean, they would test you everywhere, and they were known, like if you're in the sales program, people are going to stop you and ask you questions, and it kept you on your feet. It kept you really astute to the technology that you provided, the solutions, and then also the competition. So that was it. The first 18 months or so, I was on a special project that they put me on because of the sales experience that I broke out some of the new mid-market products. And that was a lot of fun. But anyways, I ended up progressing through sales. That's the first part. I can tell you about the future and how it actually parlayed some of my music career.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me about that. So how did music enter that?
Yeah, that's a great story. Really, it's probably one of the most interesting I've ever had in my career to date. So here we are where I'm fast forwarding. I'm a sales rep in Boston for EMC, well-known company, established, but also feared. And there's all the ankle biter technologies that wanted to take over. And so EMC came out with this new product back in 2009 called Atmos. And I ended up selling the first one globally. So VP of sales got on the speakerphone and said, Andre, cigars and wine at my house after. Andre just sold this first Atmos system globally. We're all excited. And so my manager walks by and he says, Andre, nothing good happens after 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, okay. So he doesn't want me to go? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I ended up going, and I'm at my boss's house, and we're having cigars and wine, and he's got his iPod playing, and he's playing some music. He just got a drum set for his birthday, and I had my little hand drum in my back of my car. At that time, I probably had it most of the time, and I said, "Oh wow, nice drum set." He's like, "Oh, do you play?" I said, "I play hand drums." He goes, "Like a bongo?" I'm like, "Oh, a little different." And he said, "Oh, okay." I said, "It's in my car. I can show it to you." He's like, "Go get it." I'm like, "Well, there's a lot of people here." He's like, "Just go get it." Went and got it. I played every song on his iPod on this little drum by a fire outside. He's like, "Come over tomorrow. We're going to practice. We're going to start a band." I was like,
"Oh boy."
I said, "All right, 2 drummers going to start a band." We ended up practicing, and I'll fast forward some of it. We ended up going to practice at a bigger house because he didn't have enough room in his basement. So he said, which is a beautiful house. We went to this gentleman's house who was related to the E and EMC. I married his daughter. And he said, "We're going to go play in my barn. We have some room there." His barn was the size of my house. So we were called the Barn Dogs. It was just hilarious because the barn was absolutely gorgeous. It was a carriage house, really.
Yeah.
And we started a band that ended up, a lot of other executives from EMC started to play in. They flew us to Mexico to play in club. They flew us to Vegas. We opened up for the Fray with 9,000 people. Yeah. YouTube Barn Dogs Vegas. And it was a lot of fun. They flew us to London, RSA World. We played just kickoff. We played at the House of Blues twice.
Wow.
It was really, really cool.
Dude, that's cool. I didn't know you did this stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. My wife's like, "Where are we going?" I'm like, "Well, we're going to Mexico." She's like, "Why?" I'm like, "We're going to play music for club, for sales kickoff, or the sales president's club." She's like, "Well, aren't you going to President's Club for your..." At that time, I had left EMC. I'm like, "Yeah." So I went to one club in Florida, then one club in Mexico. It was just great. Yeah.
That is awesome.
It was a lot of fun.
And I'm sure you made a lot of business connections too with that.
It was amazing. Yeah. I still talk to him today, and
Awesome.
a lot of great folks out there. So amazing sales mentors that just really pour their hearts out into their profession. So it's been great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what brought you to North Carolina?
So, after probably my late stage EMC years, I went to a distributor. So I built EMC's partner business in the Northeast, and I was at a bar, and it was right next to EMC. It's called O'Toole's, and their CTO was there, and I was like, "Oh, that's the guy that kind of directs EMC technology. And one of my friends says, "Oh, you want to meet him?" I'm like, "Sure, that'd be great." So went over and I said, "Hey, Jeff, how are you?" He's like, "Hey, nice to meet you." I said, "I have one question for you. Why don't we take servers and storage and backup and just mix them together? Because you don't need separate servers and you don't need separate storage. You don't need all these separate compute. You can utilize these." I was talking about technology, but just overutilization of compute and server storage and server compute and storage compute. He's like, "Well, there's a 7-year span on the technology." And one of his friends said, "There's a startup called Simplivity. They're going to do that." So I said, I wrote that down on my BlackBerry at the time. It was a while back. And actually, it was 2013. It wasn't really that far back. And I went to go early 2013, went to go meet the guys that were starting this company called Simplivity. And met with them, and they're saying, "We're taking server, storage, backup, WAN optimization, replication, and we're putting it into a 2U atomic building block." I was like, "Tell me more." I was just talking about this. And they coined the hyperconverged industry. So Nutanix at that same time was the competitor. So Nutanix and Simplivity were basically head to head. And then the Northeast, which was my region, was doing really, really well. We were actually first in the country. And our CEO, Duran Kempel, said, "Hey, Andre, can you go fix the Southeast? They're the worst performing region." And I said, "Yeah, I can fly down there. We can fix it. And I can go down a couple times." Like, "No, I want you to go down and move there." I said, "Okay." So talked to the family. It was very difficult. I've always wanted to live somewhere else other than Massachusetts, and we liked the South. And we knew we had a cousin that lived here. One of the Booty family members moved down here, and we explored a little bit. They wanted us to move to Atlanta, which was the New York of the Southeast, but we really loved the airport. We loved the area, and we said Charlotte's the way to go.
Good choice.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would never. My only regret is I didn't do it sooner.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. Yeah, because as a Charlottean, like I said before, I always wonder, like, what brings people here of all things. Even though I always come back, and it's a great place. I love to visit the Northeast. I love California, but this is a great place to live.
It really is. Yeah, it's just phenomenal.
So, so what are your next sort of ventures? I know you got a couple things, irons in the fire. What are you working on nowadays?
Yeah, so some of the folks at Simplivity, some of these, the founding fathers, if you will, from the technology. And Simplivity really had the superior technology. They had this control plane that was able to take and dedupe and compress I/O once and forever globally, which is this amazing thing at the time. And now deduplication is everywhere. It's almost a standard. But so these folks said, where else can we simplify? Well, people are moving to the cloud, like we mentioned earlier. And if you look at the pace of people moving from the cloud, the biggest obstruction is really the ability to automate cloud infrastructure. So today, if you had infrastructure on premises, you knew how to manage bare metal servers and storage. And with the age of virtualization, you can provision multiple servers and storage and automate on premises. When you move to the cloud, you basically have to go back to writing code by hand. And it's a lot of code. So there's companies out there that said, well, let's package some of that code, like Terraform by HashiCorp. And they package some of it, but it's still like just to draw out 4 lines of infrastructure, like what network ports I want open, what firewall I want. That's really difficult to do. Yeah. And it's about 202 lines of code just for that. And to write out a server and storage and backup and automate that, it's very, very difficult. So these guys created a platform where I can just write out in human readable language without code. I want a server, and I want this much storage, and I want this memory, and I want this compute. I want this network port open. I want this firewall. I want this security posture. And we would take that, and we'd be able to deploy it in any cloud.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So does it have the ability to spin up and pull down servers automatically? Or
Yes.
is it just for turn up?
So you can actually do, it's a platform that allows you to do it's a full SaaS platform. So think of it as you build blueprints, and I'll use the blueprint analogy. So today I want to build a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house in the cloud. If I want to do that in AWS, I have to choose without 2.0. is the name of the company. I have to choose the nails, I have to choose the screws, the type of shingles, the type of lumber, the type of cement for the foundation. It's very, very specific. I have to lay all that out. And then if I wanted to do that for Azure, it's a whole different type of screws and nails and shingles and lumber because they don't have it.
Right.
Right. It's like shopping at Home Depot and Lowe's. You don't have the same brands, but it's different stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So what we do is we build these objects that can traverse the APIs for both clouds today, and GCP coming soon. So now I can just say I want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, and I want it in Azure, or I want it in AWS, or I want it in both, and it will just go there.
That's awesome.
And it'll be all built out. You don't have to write out the code. And it does drift management. So let's say somebody comes along and uses that blueprint, and they add another bedroom or they add another bathroom. They say, hey, Chad, you're adding bedrooms, and do you want to change the blueprint, or do you want to create another blueprint, or do you want to just have a version? How do you want? Do you want some place to secure all the secrets? Like, what do you want to do? So it really manages end to end, not just the tip of the iceberg of infrastructure as code, but really all the other pieces that come along with it.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you invented virtualization.
Right. No, I know. Imagine that.
So for the people who listen, which is obviously not many, but we're working on
There's
that.
a ton of it. It's the really, really cool people that get this.
Yeah. I've talked to a couple of my guests because just in the nature of who I am, the people that come on are kind of a wide range of people. And I've mentioned to several friends and family members and stuff that, hey, I've got a podcast and I get a lot of, is it about computers? Because they don't want to listen.
Isn't that the standard answer though? I just got to take a break there. Like the description when you're in technology, if you tell someone exactly what I just tell you, and then they go back and they say, "Oh, what does Andre do? He works in computers." Yeah.
Like he works on computers.
Yeah,
I know.
Okay.
Well, and yeah, that's so true. And I try to educate, especially, it doesn't matter what age you are. Like, I think it's good to educate folks of all, like, this is a website developer and he also does computers, right? And then this guy does server management, and that's technically a computer too. So yeah, I mean, in my industry, it spans, but it doesn't span everything, because I'm in your world a little bit, but not that deep in this world some. But, one thing I talk about a lot is that we're multifaceted humans. Like, I like technology, but even in your story, technology blends with music and with your past and your history and your food and stuff. So, what are some challenges that you've kind of overcome, as the title of the podcast are? Like, what are some things that you ran up against that were difficult in that process, that you something that almost made you stop?
Well, I think one of the major hurdles is going from, so hospitality is from the heart. So whatever you feel, what's available, it's really just an outpour of your heart for someone else and for humans or for people. And when you try to transfer that into the corporate world, it's very different. There's a lot of, you get introduced to politics, corporate politics. You get introduced to bias and relationships that are there that you may or may not know about. Like EMC at some point was also called "Everyone's My Cousin," and there was difficult times just adjusting to that, right? And not knowing corporate culture versus hospitality culture. Where they both get it done, but they're both very different on how you do that. And there's a lot of different things. In hospitality, most of the time people wear their hearts on their sleeve. In the corporate culture, that's probably not the best thing to do.
Right. Yeah. I recently was talking to somebody who's deciding to take a package at their job with the coronavirus stuff they're offering. Like, hey, if you take the package 18 months, you're out of here. And so he's beginning to explore other jobs, and they're all very corporate. And so I was listening to his interview process, and I just think it's just fascinating, because I'm thinking, wow, that's a long interview to ultimately end up in a no, like, oh, you're not the right fit. And
Yeah.
and I was like, is that normal? And he said, yeah, that's just the way. It's like you said, the corporate culture, there's all these people and you have to talk so what I've found, and going back to kind of the technology stuff, is I've found that there's either small or huge. I feel like that mid range of like the reasonable ability to be a nice guy in the corporate world, and then the corporate world be kind of it seems it gets fuzzy. It's got to be black and white. It seems.
Yeah, no, it happens. So you get transformed. You either, the best way you're either on the team to kind of climb that corporate ladder,
Yeah.
or you're not. And that's where the fuzziness is. It's like sometimes you can have so much passion about a technology that you kind of get stuck driving it and you forget about the rest of the organization. And a lot of these corporations, they really start to, train you to how to take that passion and start driving it towards, start to influence a larger number of folks within their organization to have that same drive. I mean, with SimpliVity, my CEO said, Andre, he's like, you have a past history in food, right? I said, yeah. He said, well, I want you to take the recipe that you built for the Northeast and then make the recipe for the Southeast, make the recipe for the Central, make it for the West. Because this little recipe of building these tribes of resellers, building the community of folks that support your technology and support the same, have the same passion and drive. So that's what we did.
So what's that recipe? What are some of the pieces of that puzzle that you implemented? And did it work the same in the South as it did the North?
Yeah, I think all the ingredients were the same.
Yeah.
And you just had some were a little bit heavier than others. So there's, again, from the Southeast and the Northeast, there's cultural differences in how you posture yourself for selling, right? And in the Southeast, it's a lot about knowing people first and trusting them, and then it's technology. So in the Southeast, you'd have to have a little bit more of the partner community to get involved, folks that have been here, that have been selling here for a long time, that can traverse the technology and the trust to the organization that you're positioning to. And that's a big deal. So, one of the things in the Northeast that we did well was we build this relationship and trust. Like, people were able to sell the technology and have a full support behind us, which was SimpliVity and their support team. So they had support from sales, pre-sales, support, customer success, and they felt really good about that. In the Southeast, we had to build the same thing. We had to make sure that people had. We ended up opening up a large office in Raleigh. We actually ended up moving all of customer success to Raleigh. So we had about 3,000 square feet of office space in Raleigh, and that helped as well, just to have a presence here.
So dig into those details a little bit. So when you talk about building those relationships and when you're trying to sell a new technology, because I understand that, but for the people who wouldn't understand, there's this new technology. All they need to know is it takes a bunch of boxes and smashes them into one box.
Yeah.
And you're trying to pitch it to somebody. So with that relationship building, how does that even start? You start from zero, you come to the Southeast, and what do you do? What's your first couple of days look like?
Yeah, I think you just have to listen and assess, right? Assess the landscape, right? What if people are not meeting with you, who are they meeting with? If they're not listening to you, who they listen to? If they're not buying your product or a product like yours, what are they buying? And really kind of get the technical aptitude and the culture of the technologists that are down here, and just go and listen. Join groups, listen into what people are doing, CIO events, etc., and just look at the direction that they're going with technology.
So that's something right there. You go to events where those people are going to be, because I think in sales, it's, at least what I hear, is it's always about trying to get to that person, the decision maker, right? And go and talk to them and get their ear so you can throw your pitch. At least a lot of my customers, they don't come out very often. They're worried about their business. They're working. So is it a good strategy to kind of go where they go and find things that are interested so that you can listen? Because I think a lot of people, no matter what the product is, whether it's, coffee mugs or IT solutions or whatever, everybody's trying to get to the person that makes the decision to buy, which in my mind is sort of it's not really a good approach. It's the approach you have to take, but that's where you get the sort of sleazy salesperson, like, calling and trying to get through. But is it smarter to try to meet people where they are? And how would you go about that? How do you find people where they are?
Yeah. So, it's a great question in the sense that the sales, especially in this industry, is evolving. It's evolving so fast. The customer today is so educated before they even find out about your product.
Yeah.
That it's really, sales and marketing have to go together so well that they have to really be the same function. And what I mean by that is, and a lot of salespeople and marketing people will disagree, but it's really, they have to be in tune, because a customer, if you think about the last thing that you purchased, right? Just a sample strategy. So I want to purchase a new digital camera, right? So I go and find a brand name digital camera. What do? I go look at it. Then I type in that digital camera versus, and I leave it blank, and I see what else comes up. And I see, okay, so here's something else that they compare against. And then I start comparing those two. I go to comparison sites. I read reviews, right? I go to blogs. I go find out people that are using it. And I go listen to what smart people are saying. I'll go to a Gartner and say, what does Gartner think? So you kind of, by the time the customer reaches you, they're very well informed. So you have to put your best foot forward once they come to your website or whatever your platform is that they'll reach. And sometimes it's yourself through a channel partner. So there's partners out there's trusted advisors out there that go out and help these folks. They're kind of their right hand or left hand woman or man that allow them to kind of be their ear to new technologies. And so you either influence that group, and then it gets to the customer. So you're basically starting to simmer in their ecosystem, or as they come to your site, you're basically telling them exactly what you do, how you make money, save money, reduce costs, or just kind of alleviate the pain.
Yeah.
And the more info you can give, the easier. Like with Tuono, we decided to put pricing right on our page, which a lot of technologies, they want you to consult, and then it depends, which is a big, we're saying like our documentation site's open to the world. So you can just go right in, you can look at the docs, tutorials, demos, you can go right to the pricing piece. You can, and pretty soon, if you reach out to me directly, I can give you a code for early access to our community edition, which will be free, but we're just, we're trying to limit that. We have a lot of folks that want to play with it. But, So
you said the word marketing, and I was actually going to ask you about that as well, because we're talking a lot about sales and how you get into sales, how do you grow to sales. But I totally agree with what you said. But it's a different world out there. I even saw an Instagram ad for a guy, and he's going through, and it just shows him like laboring over all these hung up phone calls and calling these customers and getting hung up on, and just, it looks like a disaster. And the idea of this guy's sales is like, let's look at marketing, let's look at now, and we've even brought it up a couple of times, you've got Google, you can just go and do the research yourself, even in a couple of minutes. And I think you're right. The transparency, I think that's great. When I know in the traditional sales process, there's kind of that vetting of like, all right, this guy is wanting us to come out and bring, the whole crew, and we're going to do lunch. And then you find out the guy's looking for a really cheap solution. It's not worth your time. So if you can just right off the bat, anybody that it's not in their price range, they just say, oh, this is not for me. I think that's a great saver of time for everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of sales process. So just like, and I always tell sales professionals this all the time, there's a lot of sales training that's out there. There's a ton. And there's a lot of sales processes around this training. The same vendor that you may be working with, the customer goes through this training is buying training, just as you're going through selling training. So one of the training methodologies called Sandler training, their big pain point is to qualify out early. So look for the no up front.
Right.
Yeah. And that helps you because it gets you to the people that have the yes right up front.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I get a lot of calls. Sometimes I help the people out, but I get a lot of, hey, I've got a broken Apple Watch, and it's just like, man, that's not even close to what I do. But I'll try to make a partner with, the local Apple stores or some of the repair shops and send them over there. But yeah, I would rather just pass them along early to say that's not what we do.
Yeah.
And spend 2 or 3 minutes at most pointing them away than spend an hour finding out I'm not the right person. So,
yeah. A lot of salespeople get, especially early on in sales, they get happy ears. They hear a couple things and they're like, "Oh, they like this," but it's really not. It's not a fit. You really have to get to the know really quick.
Yeah, man, that's really good. So for marketing, I know you guys have worked on your website and SEO. You're working on that stuff now. What's a good way for people to check your product out right now?
Yeah, it's www.tuono.com.
And that's spell that.
TUONO.
Tuuno.com.
Yeah, exactly. If sometimes you'll find the hits for a very fast, one of the world's fastest motorcycles. Tuono actually came from, it's thunder in Italian. So it's disruptive. We don't want to do any cloud. So almost everyone at the organization rides a motorcycle.
Oh, got it.
And they wanted to do something cloud, but they didn't want it to be too corny. And the Italian motorcycle, the Tuono, is it's a disruptor in the motorcycle market. It's also a disruptor because it means thunder, and here we are in the cloud.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it is cloud related.
It is, yes.
It's thunder.
Yes, exactly.
Thunder in the clouds, yes.
Right.
That's awesome. Yeah, so do you feel like sales is dead, or is it just different?
It's different. I mean, no organization really can survive without sales. One of the greatest expressions in the history of sales came from the CRO of NetApp, and he said, CEO, I think, of NetApp. He said, "quote, your number one job here," and this is addressing the entire company. "Your number one job here is sales, and your number two job is whatever else you were hired to do, because everyone is in sales in an organization, and it's the ability to promote your organization, to have that transfer of emotion. You work at a place because you believe in the technology or in the offering that you have. Yeah. And you believe in it to the point where you want to tell your friends, your family, just as much as you want to tell the prospect that's having a challenge that you think you can solve."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important, because I brought up earlier the faith in the product, the belief in the product. And when I gave that example of the guy with the kind of bad version of Google Drive, would you encourage somebody that has a bad project or bad product or bad service or whatever to jump ship, to go somewhere else, or try to refurbish the product? Or what would you encourage that guy? Should he have just quit, because ultimately he did, and gone and worked somewhere else? Or what happens when you have a bad product?
Well, I don't know. I think that, so there's a product in the market for a reason, and I think there's competition for a reason. If somebody's looking at two products, there's something. So I would go back and if we rewind with that gentleman, I would have him get a lot smarter about his technology, but a lot smarter on Google's, because maybe Google is less expensive at the time. I'm just using this as an example.
Sure.
But there may be some unique feature sets that his technology has that at that time Google did not. And that's the case for a lot of the technologies out there. I mean, I've sold technologies where we were just outmarketed. We had superior technology. We had a better total cost of ownership, but the marketing of our competitor was just so much better, and they built a community versus clients, and that was a big deal.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Simon Sinek? Have you ever read the book? It's called Start With Why.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It reminds me of that, where Apple, for instance, people can make the argument that Apple computers are not as good or not as powerful or whatever, but the way they market, and when I said earlier sales is dead, I totally agree. It'll never be dead, but I feel like marketing is the new sales. It's pitching the product or the feeling of the product, like Apple. And in that book, he describes a lot about the way Apple starts with Y. You know, we are revolutionaries, and we do computing different than anybody else in the world. And if you have a Mac, you're creative and you're all these things. And then it goes to the what, which is, or no, the how, which is, you know, we use really great parts and we use some of the best engineers in the world. And then they get to the what do they actually do? Well, we make computers. And he kind of goes in reverse with Dell, which is like, we make computers. And we use really great parts and great. You've already lost the customer because they're like, I don't care.
Well, you know, early on, and I forget which book I read it in, but Apple started out with this 1-page ad in the papers and magazines, and it was full of what they did. It was all these great things, and it was just horrible. They weren't getting anything, and then they applied sales and marketing to it, and they switched to Think Different.
Yeah.
2 words, full page,
Simple.
and it just took off.
Have you ever seen the original Apple logo?
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It for those who haven't seen it, I'll throw it up on the page, but you know, it's a square and it's got this complicated black and white tree and Newton and the apple falling, and it's cool. It's pretty, but it just didn't. It wasn't simple enough, and now they've just got an apple with a bite out of it, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's, I think even something as basic, I'm fascinated with marketing. I just think it's so fascinating in the world that we're living in on a bunch of levels that I'll get into. But, you know, one is just simply the colors, the color schemes. It's like, what does this color give off psychologically to the person? You know, if you're going to choose yellow versus blue versus black. But Apple's official colors are black and white, and the third tertiary color is silver, which is just like, you know, it's cool.
I studied all that, especially with creating 2.0 and the logo.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of orange just because it pops.
Yeah.
There's other startups out there that I'm very proud of and their success, like Snowflake, which is this light blue. It's just very inviting. And you talk about, but, you know, using orange in the technical world is really reflective of like the lights. Like an amber light is not good. Something's not working.
Oh yeah.
So you really can't use orange going through the logo process. You know, so there's a lot of different things that you have to take into account.
So I have a little tangent story about orange lights. So I hired a tech years ago at a previous company, and he worked at a computer repair shop. And again, going to the broad, like, oh, he does computers, he must be good at managed services, right? So I hired this guy. He knows how to, you know, put in hard drives and whatever. And after 6 months of training, the guy, I couldn't fully trust him to go out to a customer by himself and handle problems and whatnot. So one day I just absolutely had a meeting, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to let this guy go out by himself and fix this problem. So he goes out, and there's a PoE switch. All he had to do was plug in a PoE phone, just plug it in. I may have told you the story before, but he goes out and he's looking at, there's 2 switches stacked and then the little jumper, you know, and he's looking at them like, oh, there's all these flashing lights. Some are green, some are orange. I don't know. And so he makes the assumption that orange is off. And so he pulls one out, and it just so happened to be the jumper. So he kills the whole switch. Plugs the phone in. Of course it doesn't work because he just killed the network. And I was like, did you look on the switch with the label that has the green and the orange and tells you what it does? And so he didn't last very long after that, unfortunately. But so back to the marketing stuff. Yeah, there's so much depth there with the logo and the look and the colors and the way it's perceived to the customer right off the bat, inviting or confidence. And I think that's just, I'm just fascinated with it. And the other half, which I think we're in the middle of figuring out what this is going to look like, especially when politics are involved with, like, how do you get your product out there? Because there's so much noise and there's so much garbage.
Oh, yeah.
You put your SEO words in, and it's like, man, it's sink or swim, and you just hope for the best. But it's, I don't think we fully know yet what that really looks like, what that algorithm, of course we don't know what the algorithms look like. They're hidden and they change, but it's unfortunate in a way because you could have a fantastic product. As you've said before, you could have the best product in the world and it could just sit there dormant and no one would ever find out about it because you didn't hire the right marketing person.
Yeah.
And it could totally fall flat.
Yeah, I mean, marketing is key right now, especially. I mean, let's be real with where we're at today in our times with COVID.
Yep.
You know, you're not going out to a trade show. You're not touching and feeling products. You're not.
Right.
So you're relying a lot on the marketing piece, right? And right now the platforms are very. There's Reddit, there's LinkedIn, there's a couple others. There's some forums that you can join, groups, but there's really not a lot that that can give you the human interaction you would have at a big event like VMworld or any of those conferences.
Well, and I've seen a lot of conferences going virtual, and it's just not the same.
No.
It won't be the same, and I hope one day to get back to those normal in-person conferences where you can shake hands and look at people and see and hear them and talk to them. But from now until that changes, I think it's absolutely essential to get that marketing stuff in place for the products. It's, and as creatives, I find it interesting when I meet somebody like yourself and myself we've got that creative, we play music, but we also understand technology. Yeah. To me, music is just math.
It is. That's right.
So, but I think that's going back to the sales engineer. I think having engineers that can understand marketing is also going to be super important in the future to say, how do we explain this technology simply, quickly, and beautifully? Because unfortunately, somebody I had on the podcast earlier was talking about the future of people who don't market on the internet. It's going to be sink or swim. I think if it's not already there, it's going to be, if you're not on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, all that stuff, you're going to be basically irrelevant in the future.
That's true. Yeah. It's a difficult thing, but it's exhausting too.
It is
to just be relevant, to continuously have to post and to be really in their face, in their place, in their space, as we say in sales.
Yeah. Yeah. It is exhausting. It's a lot of extra time. Mm-hmm. I think, especially for young startups, and we're both sort of in the midst of this right now. It's another full-time job to market and to stay on top and to make the content relevant and decent and not just have content because you need content.
Right.
Because we've talked earlier, I was talking to a guy earlier about long form and medium form and short form content. So it's like we consume, unlike anybody thought we would, days and days of Netflix videos where we'll watch, people in society now will watch a whole series and binge watch these shows. And I think the psychologists at the time thought nobody's going to watch that much TV.
Right.
They had no idea that we have an appetite for that long form. But at the same time, while people are binging Game of Thrones, they're flipping past image. Mm-hmm. And it's like you've got to sort of be ready to grab that user with something that maybe you just get them with that short form and then they go listen to the longer form podcast about it or whatever. It's tough. It's a lot of work.
It's oh man, that you just hit on a pretty hot spot in just marketing and just how the conditioning of how we consume information, video, except that short form, and pray for our kids because it's just they're getting bombarded with it from TikTok to Facebook to Instagram to anything else that's just so fast. Snapchat, and I'm missing a few, but it's so fast and so much, and it's continuous that they get mesmerized and their frontal lobe just kind of gets overloaded and numb to just kind of pulling in that data. Yeah,
I know this is a different subject, but I feel like kids today, just people in general, are just loaded up, maybe more than humans were made to. As far as I know, my to-do list at any given time may have 100 things on it. you know, I talk to people and I get overwhelmed and they say, oh, you should make a list. I'm like, I have a list of lists. Yeah. You know, I have
Well,
all these softwares and stuff, and it can be overwhelming.
humans have an addictive personality, right?
Yeah.
The biggest, the most addictive thing on earth is sugar. The second is probably some drug, but it may be somewhere in between is data. I think we're addicted to data, addicted to information. What's happening? What's going on? Can I learn some more? Something else I didn't see.
And fast. I want to know.
Yeah. Man. It's so much.
I mean, just a modern day example is the weather apps now will tell you when it's raining.
Yes.
Like right now.
Yeah.
It's like, there's going to be rain now.
Right.
And they're actually pretty accurate.
Yeah.
And there is some utility for that. There's some usefulness in that. But I think, and I hope that the technology companies start to kind of push back on that, which is counterintuitive. But I see Apple doing a little bit. Now we have the screen time apps on your phone and on the Mac now. And it just gives you some information of, hey, you spent 8 hours a day on average on a screen. And I know for me, I see that and I think, wow, that's a lot of time in a 24-hour day to be looking at a screen. And how many times did I pick it up? You know?
Right.
And I think that data is potentially helpful for us to just say, wait a second. But the other thing I'm really into as far as data, which I think is helpful, is the health information that we're going to get from Apple Watches and from heart monitors and some of these things that we'll be able to give more health information to medical professionals. And I really think that that's a good thing that technology has brought. But as far as some of the intake that I see with the kids, and my kids are young, but still the TikTok and all that stuff, it's just, it can't be good for you.
No, it's intense. My cousin sent me a meme. Oh, not a meme. It was a short video of somebody in ER, and they were going through like this emergency, but they were checking the guy's pulse with the Apple Watch. Check the Apple Watch. Okay. Really making a joke out of it, but it was kind of
but it's you know, we're living in the world that Star Trek was in the 80s.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
We're literally there.
I remember making a joke, and this is, you know, it can happen today, but I would hide my remote starter in one hand and I would hold up my watch with my other hand, joking around with friends and be like, all right, Kit, start up. And I'd basically hold the two buttons in my other hand, and they were like, wow, your watch can do that? I'm like, yeah. No, it was a joke.
Well, do you remember the show Dick Tracy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh man, the spy watch. It's
right.
We literally have those now.
That's right.
It's absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. So it's tough as technologists where we sell it, we make it work, we enjoy it, and I think that technology is something that 50 years ago you couldn't enjoy technology. There was no such thing, but a lot of guys really are into tech and technology and making things work and smart homes and everything. So I think it's just a balance of finding the utility in it, but also finding that it helps improve your life in some way where you get out from behind the screen and have a face-to-face conversation. Use the technology to connect with somebody that normally would have been difficult, and then sit down and have coffee with them. Yeah. So, dude, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It has been. I agree. This has been great.
We'll do it again sometime and hear more about 2 Uno and the news in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
See you, man.